quick note before we jump in, you are invited to Jumpstart Joy in 2020 with a live Pivot podcast taping and Joy of Movement book launch party here in New York City. So if you live in the city, if you live in the area, or you just know somebody who does and wants to send them the invitation, please go to pivotmethod.com/joy. The event is on Thursday, January 9th. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. It's going to be on the Upper West Side. And I'm just so excited to partner with some incredible women to help launch Kelly McGonigal, two-time guest of the Pivot podcast, help her launch her new book, Joy of Movement. We'll do a live podcast taping. Then you're going to get a movement session led by NIA Black Belt trainer Caroline Coles, accessible to all bodies to help us all experience gratitude, joy, and hope in community. And then DJ Petra, my dear friend and two-time Pivot podcast guest, is going to bring us home with a dance party. You'll also walk out with a signed hardcover copy of Kelly's new book, The Joy of Movement: How Exercise Helps Us Experience Happiness, Hope, Courage, and Connection. So again, this is all happening on Thursday, January 9th. I would love for you to join us and be there for a live Pivot podcast and so much more. Just head to pivotmethod.com/joy and you'll get all the details. And now back to today's show. What's next? This is a question we're all having to ask and answer more frequently. I'm Jenny Blake, your host of the Pivot Podcast and author of Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One. For show notes from this episode, visit pivotmethod.com/podcast. If change is the only constant, then let's get better at it. Here we go. I am so thrilled to be here today with Laura Sims. Laura and I have been traveling side by side in parallel pivot paths and circles online for a very long time. And this is actually our first time connecting live. So we didn't even catch up before we hit record. We just said, we're going to throw it all into the show. Laura is an expert in meaningful work who challenges conventional wisdom by asking people to ditch their passions and start with purpose. She's the creator of Your Career Homecoming, a celebrated career change program that helps people discover the meaningful work that's right for them. And you know I love me a good contrarian, so I can't wait to get into things. Laura's colorful career history includes a history degree, an MFA in acting, getting fired from a dream project, quitting multiple jobs, teaching undergraduate and graduate classes, and a successful career as an actor, where she worked on network television, performed in every state on the Eastern Seaboard, received multiple callbacks from Cirque du Soleil, and shared a sound booth with Sandra Oh of Grey's Anatomy fame. Laura, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so glad to talk with you. I feel like we should have been talking like way long ago, so I'm glad we're finally making it happen.
I know, but maybe 10 years ago would have been a good idea. How long have you been doing your own thing now?
Actually, it'll be 9 years in January. So wow. Yeah, getting there.
And I just have to ask you, Cirque du Soleil, are you serious?
I tried to run away and join the circus, Jenny. They wouldn't have me, but I got close.
Are you bendy and strong enough to even try out for Cirque du Soleil?
Well, not so much in the bendy and strong category, but I was there for physical comedy. So doing their kind of clowning roles. So I auditioned in Los Angeles. They have kind of a scout, in different cities. And so I auditioned for their scout in Los Angeles, went through a couple rounds of performing original comedy routines. And then when they had the big guns from Canada come down, I went through 2 days of auditions with them. And it is the most intense and challenging audition situation I was ever in. Loads of fun, but you had to have prepared stuff, and then they would put you on the spot and give you 15 minutes to prepare something, and then you perform it in front of the group. I feel like if I can get through that audition, that's my I can do anything in life kind of moment. It was intense.
Not just that audition, but I have so much respect for actors who the nature of the work is to go for so many auditions and never hear anything back. How did you do it? How did you navigate that process of just constant, I don't know if you experienced constant rejection, but certainly that constant uncertainty of where your next job would come from?
Yeah, you really have to do some Jedi mind training around this, because otherwise, I mean, if you take it personally and you're like, I got rejected again, you will quit. I mean, you won't be able to get up and go do it again. So, you really kind of have to frame it for yourself that like, okay, the audition itself is a chance to perform. It's a chance to practice the craft. It's a chance to, be in front of a room and hopefully do some magic. And, sometimes they're not going to hire you because really you didn't do a good job and you could have done better. And that's your own, that's your own thing. But a lot of times you're not getting the job because you were too tall or too short, or the producer doesn't, you remind him of their ex-wife. And so subconsciously you're not going to get it. Like there's all these things that have nothing to do with your performance that go into whether or not you get cast. And so really all you can really, focus on and take credit for is, did I do the best performance that I could today? And so you kind of are evaluating each audition by that standard. And so if you didn't do your best, well, great. Now I know where I need to go do some more work. And if you did, then you just kind of have to say F it and go on to the next one, because you have so little control over what they're looking for and if you get the yes or not.
That's such incredible resilience training for life, and certainly entrepreneurship and careers as well.
Yeah.
I love what you said. I never had heard it put exactly that way, which is that treating the audition itself as an opportunity to perform and act. And that's not a means to an end. You can see it as a worthy and worthwhile event and time to practice in and of itself.
Yeah. And something that gets talked about, in actor circles a lot is, you would love to go book the job. What is more important is that you book the room. So if you're not right for that particular role, hopefully they're going to remember you. And when another opportunity comes up that you'd be right for, they're interested enough to call you back.
I've heard so many people get success with that, even within companies.
Yeah.
They apply for a role, an internal transfer, they don't get it. And then they're discoverable. They're on that team's radar for the next thing. And then I've seen so many cool opportunities come that way.
Yeah. So book the room.
Book the room. I love that. Maybe that will go in the title. Tell us, what is a career homecoming? Yeah.
So I want people to have a career that, feels like home, that feels like it's a natural extension of who they are, where you don't have to put on a mask or have this alter ego that goes to work and then you're a separate person when you come home, so that the best of who you are, you feel like you get to show up and just be you, for your work, and your quirks and your humor and your strengths and all of that is part of it. And you don't have to go through this weird filter where I'm one person at work and I'm one person somewhere else. And it's something that is also really it can challenge you, we hope, but also nourish you in a way, and play this really important role in your life. It's not just clock in, clock out, get a paycheck, go home.
One thing I see with a lot of career changers is fear and worry. So fear, well, I can't really show up as myself or be home because either that's not professional or it won't be welcome or people are going to judge me. But there's also anxiety that who said that exists or that exists for me? And you're a lot more on the ground with your course and doing this work. So I'm curious, how do you help people stay hopeful that that's possible and even give themselves permission to believe that that's possible in what can often be very long job search processes and I don't want to assume that it's going to be long. It can also happen in a flash, but just like you described with the acting auditions, sometimes people go months without any real feedback and it's to no fault of their own.
Right. One of the things that I work with clients on from day one, you've already said the word is resilience. How can I be the person I need to be to go out in the world and do this work? And part of that is just getting the job or starting the business. So understanding that there are certain things you do have influence and control over, but there are certain things that you don't, and making sure that you're focusing on the things you can control and really not thinking, I truly believe that when you understand what you have to offer, what you have to contribute, how you want to make a difference, the value of that. And you can go out and seeking the right combination of who needs that and how am I going to fit in, with a larger organization or helping solve a problem through a business. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And so, okay, world, you want me to play the time game? We're going to see how long this takes. Fine, I will play that game. But I'm not going to bag it because one person said no or 15 people said no. I'm going to pursue this because this is my path. This is how I want to make a difference. And it's going to take as long as it takes. Now, in the meantime, maybe we got to get a side job, or maybe you got to do something else to get some income coming in. But I have zero doubt that when we get those internal things lined up about here's what I want and I can articulate it and all of that, it's figuring out the timing.
I love that. And I'm often referencing to clients and friends, no matter what they're looking for, be it a job or a relationship. Tosha Silver, her book, Outrageous Openness, there's this one line that the perfect job is already picked and on its way to you. And you could even add in perfect timing, or the perfect partner is already picked and on its way in perfect timing. And I find that thought, just like what you coach clients on, so reassuring that it's not a question of if you're going to find that career homecoming, but when. And sticking with it long enough, no matter what you need to do to kind of bridge that time in between to see that through, and just having faith that it does exist. And you and I can say on the other side of the coin, we see so many people find that resonant work that it is possible, but it's not always on the timeline that people expect.
Right. And I think that, something that you and I have is just longevity of seeing this happen for other people. I just have so much proof and evidence that this is true. And that if you know what you're after and you know the value of that and you stick with it, that it works out, and again, sometimes the timing is a bummer. I wish it would happen a little more quickly, but you just start to see the people who get frustrated and quit or move on. And, you're allowed to pivot. People can change their mind. There's no problem with that. But, I kind of think what's the alternative? What is the alternative to being hopeful and determined?
Right.
What do we do with that dream? What do we do with that drive? I'd rather go for it, even if it takes a while.
And I used to remind myself this when I was single, because I was single for a long time where I didn't have a committed relationship. And I used to remind myself that I would kick myself if I had spent all those single years just in agony, feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough. Life is miserable. And I'd be so mad if the day I found my partner, I would then look back and think, what a waste of my life force, Right. So I would kind of project myself into the future and say, by the time I meet someone, and I'm married now a year in, by the time I meet someone, it will be perfect timing. And I will want to look back on who I was and how I spent my time leading up to it as joyful and easeful and not in a constant state of fear, worry, anxiety, pining, any of those things that I had, of course, experienced earlier in my life.
Right. And, probably easier to fall in love with you, at least the right person, when you are joyful and on your own path and doing your own thing. And, that's attractive.
Right. Same for job seekers.
Yeah.
Since Pivot launched in 2016, I've had this side Evernote folder where I clip notes, articles about retirement. So I do think we need a new word for retirement. There are so many pivoters that I meet who are maybe retiring in quotes from their main career that they had, but just because they turned 65 doesn't mean they don't want to work anymore. And I'm very fascinated by kind of career pivots that happen at that age and stage. And I know you've given a lot of thought as well to ageism. And I hear from clients more and more that they say as they're going for jobs, maybe particularly on the coasts or in the tech industry, where they say to me straight up, I am experiencing ageism. I feel it. I see it in who's in the offices. It's uncomfortable. And they have such a sense that they're kind of legitimately being passed up for opportunities, or being told, oh, we're looking for digital natives, things like this. And I haven't talked about it yet on the podcast. And shout out to Mark Ross, who I know is doing a lot of work in this area too. He's a listener. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on ageism. And of course, some part of this could be somebody's internal story, like maybe they're assuming that it's ageism when it isn't always. But I also do think there is a very real phenomenon that's happening, especially in certain industries. So I'm curious to hear your take on this.
Yeah, no, I think ageism is real. I mean, just like all the isms, all the isms are real. What I try to work on with clients, and I'm less on the forefront of the job search strategy, right? Most of the work I'm doing is about the discovery process of what do you want? What do you even want to do? Why does this matter to you? What are you going to go pursue? But, what I'm always working with clients on is there are external boundaries and prejudices in the world that as individuals, we're not going to solve. I can't erase ageism for you, right? So let's do everything we can to remove the internal barriers. So any mental garbage you have about how you're going to be perceived, what the limitations are for you, let's do our best to get that out of the way. And again, build that resilience. So if you do, encounter ageism or sexism or racism or whatever out there, you're not going to take it personally. You're not going to crumple. You're not going to quit. And again, it's frustrating and it's not fair, but it's real. So what can we do to prepare you to go out and persevere anyway?
I'm so glad you mentioned the stage that you focus on, which is that discovery. And I'm curious, of course, to hear about why you shouldn't pursue passions and go for purpose instead. But also, I know you talk and think a lot about the identity shift that accompanies career homecomings. And I think it's particularly pronounced when someone's identity has been tied up with, let's say, the company they work for, like mine was. I was so afraid when I left Google, people wouldn't even want to be my friend. If I didn't work there, I would be of no value to them. I would not be an interesting person. And I was genuinely concerned about that. And that's only when I was leaving, when I realized how tied up my identity was with the halo of the brand at that time. So can you address that piece, the identity shift and the passion versus purpose?
Yeah. So in terms of the identity shift, I mean, this is something that I really struggled with, making the decision to leave acting. It didn't feel like I was just leaving a profession. It felt like I was leaving a life. I mean, for me, it was not just what will people think of me, although that was certainly part of it. But, acting, it was my passion. It's how I had made most of my friendships. It's how I met my husband. It was the way I made money. I think I derived a lot of, personal sense of value from that. And then the thought of, okay, well, I'm going to leave acting. It didn't feel like, well, what am I going to do next? It felt like, who will I be? This has been such a big part of my identity since I was a child. If I don't do this anymore, it's not just what job is next, although that's an enormous, terrifying question, but who am I going to be without this? And I see a lot of people go through it, especially I think if you've done something either creative and artistic, or if you've been on a prestige track, maybe with a very well-known company, right? Where you feel like there's a certain amount of cachet with being involved and being associated with that level of, innovation and creativity and all of that. And so I think part of the work of having a homecoming in your career is just that idea of first coming back to a home within yourself. Fundamentally, who am I? And that we as people are not defined by what we get up and go do from 9 to 5. There's more to all of us than that. And if there was some disaster or you were involved in some horrible accident and you literally couldn't work anymore, that's just off the table for you. What is your value as a human being? Who are you if we strip away the context of work? And I think coming from that starting place is like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm still a valuable human being. I'm still a good friend. I'm still a contributor. I'm still a creative person. I'm still able to come up with ideas and counsel people or whatever your thing is. But I think just being able to take off that like the work jacket, like just take that off and think about who we are as people. I imagine there was some of that going on with you as you made your pivot.
Well, I love how you just described it as taking off the work jacket, because there's so many layers to that question. Who are you? If you couldn't work anymore, or you couldn't work again, or for a period of time, who are you? And what's your gift to the world by your presence alone? And my journey has been grappling so much with that. Even especially in my 20s, I would say, I just associated my work was my worth, whether it was where I worked, what I earned, or even my side hustle, even being an author, launching books, having a blog. And I did not even grasp the full extent to which I associate my identity with my work, my output, what I do, until I met Michael, my husband, and he's Lebanese. So in Lebanese culture, it's all about relationships, family, and community. If you go to a social event, the first question is most certainly not, what do you do? Nor is your value as a person defined by that. People are so much more about your heart. Like, it's a very loving culture, warm, loving, welcoming. So it's like the light in your eyes, the quality of your heart. Who are you being? That's how my experience of being in Lebanon, it has been that way. Whereas here in the States, it's like, you are what you do.
Yeah.
Where do you work? It's what we do all day. It's what we obsess about. Like, the quote, American dream is, I even looked it up the other day. It's like the ability to pursue our best work, and earn healthy rewards for doing so. And it has nothing to do with being the American dream. It's about achieving and owning.
Yeah, we are little achievement bots here.
Yes. And we don't even realize it, I think, compared with other cultures. And I know some Pivot podcast listeners, many are not in the US, but we don't even realize, I think those of us who are US based, we're in the water. We don't even see the extent to which our identity is tied up in ways that other cultures are not.
Well, and I think culturally we have this nobility around struggle. Like, I'm going to do it the hard way. I'm going to work the hardest. I'm going to overcome the most stuff. I'm going to have the biggest, transformation from having it rough to doing really well. And one thing that I'm like shaking my clients to beat out of their heads is this idea that you get moral brownie points for doing things the hard way. Like, what if your work wasn't a struggle?
Or a hustle, or a grind.
That's not to say that you don't have to show up and participate. There should be effort involved. Like, I always want people to do work that is going to challenge them to stretch beyond what they thought they were capable of. That's exciting. But, why does it have to be so hard? Why do we feel like it doesn't count unless we bled and sweat for it? It's very, I call this this whole thing, I call it the boomer blueprint. This idea that, we've got to work hard and that's its own reward. And you just wait until retirement before you can enjoy your life. And, the harder, the better. And you just pick one thing and stick with it. And it's exhausting.
Well, Pivot listeners know my motto, let it be easy, let it be fun. And nothing has taught me the lesson you just described more than entrepreneurship, because there's no reward for hard work. Things don't succeed simply because you work hard or you stress yourself out or you work long hours. That doesn't guarantee anything, actually. And I'm sure you've experienced this too in your business, that just because you work hard, you're not entitled to anything. Whereas even in a corporate environment, if you're seen and perceived as working hard, maybe you'll get good feedback. You might even get promoted. But in the business sense, it just doesn't work like that. So
no, that was a reality check. I know when I started my business, I had this mentality like, the harder I work, the more money I will make. And it is absolutely not true. It is not true. Like, right. I would just labor over creating some new thing, and it would just, launch to crickets, and I would be just devastated that but I worked hard. So right. Why isn't it paying off? And, a lot of times, like, my business is so streamlined now, I'm always like trying to find the edge of what's the least I can do to create the most impact. Because it's not that I just want to be like sitting around eating bonbons all day. That's not, invigorating to me, but I'm trying to find the spot of, what is going to be the most effective way to, like, still having pleasure and joy and playfulness in it, but like, what is really going to move the needle? What's going to make a difference in the business? What's going to make a difference for clients? And it's not just working harder and, right. and doing things with the most struggle.
Absolutely. And what about the pitfalls of passion?
Yeah. Okay. So disclaimer, if you're listening and you have followed your passion and it's working out for you, good. So just like keep doing whatever is working. I'm all about let's do what works. I got into acting because it was my passion. That worked for me for like a decade. It was amazing. And then it wasn't. And so, I really am speaking to the people for whom that hasn't worked and it's not going to work. The whole follow your passion, I really think of it as a backlash to that boomer blueprint. Follow your passion is all about just play, do what is rewarding for you, do what's exciting for you. If you love it enough, the money will come. Just as long as you're happy, that's what matters. And again, if that is working for you, keep going. It assumes, one, that you have a passion. And a lot of people just don't. They don't have one thing that they're like, oh, I'm going to make my entire work around this one passion. It assumes that it's possible to monetize your passion, which is not always. And it also assumes that the activity you're engaged in is what really matters when it comes to doing meaningful work. Right? So I'm always shifting towards, let's orient instead of around passion, because even if you're doing something you're passionate about, let's say that you are, a musician, and great, you're going to follow your passion and you're going to, play your violin. Let's say if you don't have an audience for that, if you don't have a feedback loop for that, if you're not in relationship with anyone, like how many hours are you going to sit in an empty room and play violin before it starts to feel empty? Like at some point, you want it to affect someone or to interact, or there needs to be this give and take. And so I'm always having clients, instead of passion, start with a sense of purpose, just because I think it's more sticky and it's more practical. So with a sense of purpose, we're looking at things like, okay, how do I want to contribute? What kind of difference do I want to make? How do I want to interact with people? What impact, do I want my work to have? And yeah, we're going to look at your strengths and abilities. And if playing the violin is part of that, well, then we'll consider that. But it's just purpose is about relationship and connection to others. And passion is generally about your own experience of an activity. And it's just very different very different starting points in terms of career.
I have never heard those two such common career words put that way. That passion is your experience of an activity and purpose is oriented more about others. Wow. Love it. I'm having my Oprah, aha moment, I even talk in Pivot about project-based purpose and taking the pressure off of having to define even a life purpose, which can be so lofty and intimidating as well. And I say, and if you don't have a purpose, you can borrow mine, which is to be as helpful as possible to as many people as possible. And it doesn't even have to be all about the numbers or quantity, but just as many people who are in my orbit, who I interact with day to day. That's it. Just show up with positivity and helpfulness, and that's it. And I never really know exactly what form that's going to take, but that's been a long time guiding light for me. And true to your definition of the terms, that one really is about other people. And I had never thought of it that way.
Well, and I love how you're saying, let's take the pressure off that we have to find this life purpose. I tell clients, what we're not trying to figure out is what is your, predestined one ring to rule them all, capital P life purpose. Like personally, I don't believe in that. But professionally, in terms of career stuff, like so much pressure. I have to decide today what the guiding force of my entire existence is, and then find a job that too much. So I'm always trying to make it smaller and more grounded with the realization too, that our sense of purpose changes over time, and that's normal, and that should be happening. What I was deeply, cared about and was fired up about at age 16, I'm 40 now, is not exactly the same. I mean, there are some through lines and there's some continuity, but, what job I might have picked right out of college, it may not speak to me today at this stage of my life. So allowing ourselves to not be locked in, like so many people, I feel like they want their I need to find my why, like my capital W why. I need to have like this tagline or this one-liner that kind of encompasses what I'm all about. And I just like, you're not a brand. You don't need a slogan. Like, let's figure out what you connect to, what matters to you, and go from there without the pressure of finding the one thing.
And that pressure to be a brand and CEO of You Inc. is more, there's more of it now than ever.
I know. I see that a lot, especially like, in Instagram kind of places where it's like, you are your brand. With all due respect, I am not my brand. Like I'm a person, and I have faults and quirks and weirdness and like stuff that people in my personal life are going to get exposed to that people like through my brand aren't, just because I don't feel like it's appropriate. That doesn't mean I can't be human or I can't bring myself to it. But if I'm here to serve, you don't have to know what I ate for breakfast. You don't have to know what book I'm reading to my kid at night. I mean, I can share those things with you, but my work is like, it's an extension of who I am, but it's not the entirety of who I am. And I don't feel like I need to have every relationship and moment of my life be like a teachable moment that I can share. You don't get all of me. Like I have my own private and personal life. And I think it's healthy to have some of those boundaries.
I am smiling so big over here and laughing, cracking up, because I gave almost the exact same, I call it a rant, which is what I did on my friend Ksenia's podcast. We recorded yesterday. It's called Woke and Wired. I don't know if it will be out yet on her show, but I ranted about Instagram and why I pivoted off of jennyblake.me and over to pivotmethod.com, because exactly what you just said, and this goes to show we are truly kindred spirits, because I just said, I don't feel good when I sign off of social media after I've been scrolling, infinite scroll. I don't feel better than when I started. It distracts my focus. It gives me this piecemeal feeling throughout the day. It's not where I do my big ideas or my deep work. I don't like the feeling of guilt and obligation of responding to comments. Every time I post one thing, great, now I created, 20 more, even if they're so nice. But most of all, I don't want to be judged or followed or anything because of how I look, how I dress, what I ate for breakfast, even what my bookshelves look like. I mean, I have posted those on my account. I post on Instagram maybe like twice a year. And I'm with you. I like having some distance, not to hide anything. Anyone who has attended anything I do live knows I'm a complete open book, but I don't want to build a brand around my image. I prefer for it to be around my ideas. And if I share aspects of my personal life, that's cool, but not how I'm going to create value. It's not for me. So I'm with you.
Yeah. And personally, like I get burned out real fast on feeling like I have to document my life experience. And again, I think this is like, go do what works for you. If you are rocking out Instagram and love it, then keep going. But,
right.
I don't want to come up with a life lesson every time I go to the park with my child. Like, I just want to be at the park with my child. I don't want to reinvent these little Kodak moments, because like, oh, we didn't catch it on camera. Like, I just want to go to the park,
I'm the same way.
And I think business wise, like if I'm being honest, if I felt it would make a tremendous difference in my business, I would probably do it more often. I think too, like when it comes to my business and the work I do, the metric that I care most about is lives changed. Right? I want to be doing deep, substantial, lasting work with clients. And if it's not helping me do that, it doesn't get that much of my attention. And honestly, if I thought Instagram would allow me to do that more, then I'd probably be on Instagram more. But so far, it's just not been a necessity. So I think, social media, especially Instagram for me, I feel like I do like it. I mean, I like to get on and scroll and like, I follow famous pets and,
me too. Oh, not famous ones.
And,
I just follow. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I like Instagram kind of like I like a cinnamon roll. Like it's delicious at first and I like it every now and then, but like, I don't want to sit down and eat a can of cinnamon rolls every day. That's how it starts to make me feel.
Oh, that's so funny. I love the cinnamon roll analogy. Yeah. The thing I love doing on Instagram, I follow puppies, dogs, piglets, little piggies, rabbits. That's what I like to look at. I don't even follow quote cards or anything. And I get annoyed when the algorithm, like I accidentally tap on too many people's posts, maybe in my network, and then they start showing me the people. And I'm sorry, I love you all, but it's not what I go to. It's not my cinnamon roll. My cinnamon roll are these cute little animals.
Oh, there's a raccoon that's more famous than me. I'm in. I'm on board. I'm following.
I know. And my experience was similar in that I don't like walking around the world. It really stopped me from being present because I would be experiencing something and then thinking, well, why don't I take a photo of this? Or how can I share it? Or what will I, just like you, what will I write? And I realized like, I just don't want that extra filter, to use an Instagram term, on my experience of the world day to day. And yeah, I think I do rant about this a lot, and maybe Pivot listeners are really sick of hearing me talk about it, but I feel that it's important because it's, again, the idea of career homecoming, whether you're working in an organization or working for yourself, is that permission to just say and be honest, this doesn't work for me, even if it seems to be working for so many other people. And there are absolutely influencers who are creating incredible opportunities and income for themselves by doing exactly what we're saying we don't enjoy doing. But that just goes to show that there's room for all of us.
Exactly. There's more than one way, and I think, in a true homecoming, you're paying attention to what, maybe how successful and effective something is for you, but also just how it feels, and it just doesn't feel that good for me.
Even that noise. We have the same one. Another interesting thing you've talked about is why you shouldn't necessarily take a break to figure yourself out, as a lot of people are inclined to do when they're pivoting. What's your take on that? When does it make sense to step back and take a break and dive into oneself? And what's the flip side of that?
I mean, I love taking a pause, and taking a break and doing a deep dive into yourself. The problem that I see people run up against is that when they are trying to figure out, okay, if I don't want to do this job I'm doing, I got to figure out what comes next. They don't have the tools, the strategy, a process to figure it out. And so what they're doing is like this personal development quest where maybe they're journaling a lot. Maybe they're reading self-help books. Maybe they get really into tarot. Maybe they go see a therapist. Maybe they're doing strength assessment kinds of things. They end up with information about themselves and they have all this self-knowledge, and maybe they're a more evolved person, which is always good, but they still don't know, what do I want to go do? They don't know how to answer that question. Like they know that they're a people person or they're an introvert or, connection and community are their strength, but like, then what? Like they don't know how to bridge that gap between all this personal development work and how to apply that to a career. So I've had clients who have come to work with me. They're like, it's just time. I just need time. And so they take 6 months off or they take 12 months off and they still don't know what they want to do. And so now they still don't know what they want to do, but they have lost 6 or 12 months of income. And now they're really feeling the pressure of like, oh crap, now I really got to know what I want to do. But I've taken this time off. I'm not any closer. I'm almost more confused than I started because I have all this information, but I don't know what to do with it. And so that's kind of the danger and the red flag about that. I think it's always great to learn more about yourself and do personal development stuff, but you've got to know how to bridge the gap between fun facts about yourself and then what does that mean for your career?
Speaking of these big questions, we are turning the corner into a new decade. Dun, 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 dun. No pressure, everybody, but I'd love to know, what are one or two of your favorite exercises when it comes to helping people find that homecoming feeling?
Okay. It's hard to boil that down to one or two exercises, Jenny.
Give me your whole body of work, Laura, right now.
I guess like a go-to starting place that I use for myself that I have clients do is just, I love a blank sheet of paper and at the top, simple question, what matters most? And then just write. and the only trick with this exercise is you have to be honest. Ha ha ha. Right? The only trick. So, what comes out may be about quality of life stuff. It may be about mission and purpose. It may be about the environment that you're going to be in or the kind of people that you want to work with. It may be about your health or something that feels, a little bit in the sidecar. But I'm always trying to get people to come back to what is most important, and again, that's going to shift over different periods of time in your life, but I'm just kind of grounding it in now, in this moment, what matters most.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. That's such a great, I love you said even about the state of your business these days, that it's, I think you use the word simple. Like distilling something down to the essence. And that's such an amazing question to do that. What matters most?
It keeps me out of busy work. I will do that for myself quite often if I'm looking at my to-do list and I'm like, oh, there's no way I'm going to do all this today. I'm like, well, I probably don't have to. What actually matters most in terms of accomplishing things today? And then there's like 3 things on my to-do list, and that's a doable day. So I'll use that just like in terms of paring down my to-do list. I will do that, kind of end of year, beginning of year planning. That's my go-to.
What does your planning look like? So as we enter 2020, what's your preferred way to think about the year? So my birthday is January 1st.
Wow. So I almost feel like I have this reset, along with the rest of the world, just in terms of my birthday. So what I love to do is, I'm kind of percolating and thinking about business stuff and personal stuff, but usually on the 31st, what I like to do is just like hole up by myself for several hours, like with the candle and the tea and the, all that stuff, and just have time to write. And sometimes I'll find prompts, from somebody on the internet or a book or something. But a lot of times it's just me and blank sheets of paper, just kind of doing an inventory of what just happened in the last year. Like what just happened personally, professionally, just kind of looking back and taking stock and taking some time to, before I even do any goal setting, really thinking about, just what is that vision I want? What is the feeling? What do I want to be able to experience in the next year? And from there, I'll tend to maybe on another day go back through and kind of set more, goals that have numbers and things like that. But I really just like to have time to think about what just happened and, what do I want to be different in the next year? And it's really not more structured than that. It's a little different from year to year, but that's kind of my New Year birthday ritual.
And birthdays are such a powerful time of renewal as well. Like has always felt like my own personal New Year. So fascinating that yours is right at the same time. Yeah. And you're a Capricorn, huh?
Indeed.
Aren't Capricorns known for like just being really diligent and able to just put their heads down and work, get things done? Like you probably enjoy working to some extent.
I do. I'm a double whammy because I'm also a firstborn. So I've got like firstborn Capricorn, just, yeah.
I read that Shonda Rhimes of Grey's Anatomy and all the rest of her shows, that she's a Capricorn. And now that's who I associate. Like, yep, there it is. Just that incredible ability to just focus and create things. So cool. Amazing. Well, Laura, this has been so fun. I'm really thrilled that we got to connect after all this time. And it's so clear to me now, having had this conversation, how much we really do have in common. I think we've known that about each other for a really long time.
Jenny, I would say I'll see you on Instagram, but I know I won't.
Well,
so.
Exactly. I won't see you there. Talk to you on our next podcast, whenever that may be. That's so funny. So even if not on Instagram, where can people find you if they want to learn more and keep in touch?
Yeah, I'm at yourcareerhomecoming.com. And, occasionally I will pop on social media, so come along. But, the best way to really connect is to just kind of get a little bit deeper into my world. I've got a Facebook group. I've got a nice free training. So just, come let yourself in and we'll connect.
And if you do want to follow Laura's, whenever they may be posts on Instagram, it's at Your Career Homecoming.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. Cool. Laura, thank you so much. This has been such a delight. And I look forward to keeping in touch and hopefully many listeners as well. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Pivot Podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode or my insider tips and templates by signing up for Pivot List, a curated twice monthly newsletter where I share the inside scoop on what I'm reading, watching, listening to, and the latest tools I'm geeking out on. Sign up at pivotmethod.com/pivotlist. Get show notes from this episode at pivotmethod.com/podcast and connect with me on Twitter at Jenny_Blake. Remember, build first, then your courage will follow. Hasn't it always?